Hey Pennsylvania, it's Wine O'Clock on Wine Time PA. Join Rob, Holly, and Steve as they explore their home state of Pennsylvania and all the wonderful wineries it has to offer. Each month, they take a journey tasting the wines of PA. If you're able, pour a glass of your favorite wine and join us now for Wine Time.
Welcome again to Wine Time PA, the monthly podcast where three everyday wine drinkers traverse their home state of Pennsylvania, trying to visit all of its over 400 wineries. I'm one of your hosts, Holly, and today I'm joined by my husband, Steve.
Hello.
And our close friend, Rob.
Cilantro.
In today's episode, we'll be discussing Penns Woods Winery, located in Chaddsford, Pennsylvania, which is in the Philadelphia suburbs, actually really close to the Delaware border. We'll be talking about our experience visiting the winery for those of you who have never been and want to plan your own visit. And of course, we'll be each discussing our personal favorite wines. We visited in June of 2024, so any information we share is from that time frame. We should also note that this is the first time for Steve and I have visited, but Rob, I think you've been there before.
Yes, I've been to Penns Woods many times in the past, but it's been several years since I've been there last. So I was really excited to head back there and see what's changed over the years since my last visit. And they were really good before when I visited them. So I was excited to see if anything was better, worse, or stayed the same. But spoiler, they were a lot better this time. And that's saying a lot because they were really excellent. I remember them before.
Yeah, and even though it's the first time for Steve and I've heard of this winery and have wanted to visit it for years. It's definitely like a bucket list winery. They get a lot of recognition and accolades in their state, so I was excited to pull in that day, despite it literally being 100 degrees outside.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess my heat machine was set on high that day.
Yeah, it was another scorcher. It's almost intolerable to be outside that day.
It was pretty brutally hot that day.
Yeah.
And I was also really excited for this visit. Penns Woods is known for producing these European-style wines, and they really promote working with the land and the soil to produce wines that are a reflection of their terroir, which is said to be terroir that mirrors the Bordeaux and Burgundy regions of France, especially for their Chardonnay grape, which is the oldest wine that they have. They have 3 vineyards with 11 different varietals, and the Chambourcin is the only exception to them growing their own grapes, which they get from the Gettysburg area. So all their wine is still 100% Pennsylvania grown. Fun fact, one of their vineyards is on a national park, the First State National Historic Park, and they're only one of 2 vineyards in the country that can say that, which I thought was kind of interesting, actually.
That's a neat footnote, yeah.
Yeah, you don't really think of vines in vineyards growing inside of a national park that's run by the federal government, but yeah, I'm sure that there's an interesting story behind it. The family is also really passionate about what they produce, and you can tell that the staff is also passionate in the wines that they serve. And we just want to give a quick shout out to Dawn, who guided us through our tasting. She was just amazing and clearly loves her job.
Yeah, she does. And also, you're talking about the terroir and all that. I read an interview with the president of the winery recently online. I remember her saying that people need to stop expecting PA grapes and wines to express themselves like other wine regions in the world. Basically, she was saying, let's celebrate what can be done in the state of Pennsylvania and not play the comparison game. So I love that. I love her passion and her dedication to showcasing Pennsylvania wines.
Yeah, and I have to say, I completely agree with that sentiment. I love Pennsylvania wines for what they are and what makes them distinct from other places in the world.
That's sort of why we started this podcast, was to bring some recognition to the Pennsylvania wines.
Yeah, Pennsylvania had maybe not the best reputation, a decade or so, and I just don't think that's fair, and it's so much better now. We have some great wineries in this state.
We do, and I think that's changing thanks to wineries like Penns Woods. So hopefully talking about this makes you want to go plan a visit. If we're going to go, though, should we make a reservation?
Kind of depends on the time of year when you're visiting. Monday to Friday, seating is on a first-come, first-served basis. Saturday and Sunday reservations are required, but only from November to mid-April due to their limited indoor seating. You can make reservations online or by calling them. During the warmer seasons from mid-April through October, they do not take reservations. The indoor facility is closed and all outside seating is first come, first serve. They also note that once their parking lot reaches capacity, they no longer allow guests. They do post messages on their social media to alert you of this, so you're going to want to check that out if you're planning to visit.
Yeah, especially probably on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. Thankfully, we got there nice and early, so that wasn't a problem for us. But you do want to check ahead if you're going to plan to go there in a busier time of year. As Holly said, we visited in the summer, so we were there outside, but they do have a nice indoor area. It's a farm, and there were a huge yard area behind the barn right next to the vineyard. They have a pavilion which had seating, but they also had tables and chairs on the lawn covered by sunshade sails. So check out our social media for some pictures of our visit there from June 2024.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that they allow children there, and those, as long as there was somebody over 21 as an adult. However, I did like in the seating outside, they had areas of the table sectioned off for adults 21 and only. They also had the area though for the families with the kids, which I think had more space so kids could kind of run around and base that energy. But again, I just like that they had those options like for family and if you wanted more of an adult setting. So I guess let's move on and talk about tastings. How do they work? What do they offer?
Yeah, so the number of wines available varies depending on when you visit, but there seem to have roughly 20 available at any given time. You may not be able to try them all, though. Flights are 5 pre-selected wines, and they rotate what's available, but they also have some other wines available outside of the tasting for purchase by the glass. Some are available only by bottle, though, which is unfortunate for some of us that are doing podcasts and want to taste, but that is how it is. When we visited, they had about 15 options available between flights and glasses, and it's worth noting that they cater more to a drier wine palate. However, they do have some sweeter wines as well. We got lucky the day we visited, and they actually had 2 different flight options, with the second one highlighting some rosé wines, including a couple that were not actually released yet. So in full transparency, we always pay for our own flights and our own tastings. We never expect anything special, but when we did mention that we were doing research for a podcast, they allowed us to purchase both of the flights and share amongst the 3 of us, and we each just got a slightly smaller pour. She was also kind enough to offer us a couple of additional small samples of wines that others were buying from the bottle, so they already had the bottles open, just so that we could experience those and have something to talk about during our episode.
Yeah.
Just want to be really transparent about that.
Yeah, I was really appreciative of them letting us to try all the wines and stuff, and we still paid for our flights. But I also think it's worth mentioning that their website, they have a wine shop of all of their wines, and you can click on the wine, and you can get a lot of information about the wine that you're interested in, like the grape that they use, the flavor profiles, and they even note when you should drink the wine, which I really like. They'll tell you if you should drink it now, if it's okay to let it age several years.
Yeah, and I loved how, especially for their blends, you could go see what the construction of that wine was. So if you found one that you particularly liked, it was nice to know, oh, this has got Chardonnay and Moscato and like 3 others.
Yeah, agree.
They also have a wine club with 3 levels of membership. Now, we don't talk too much about wine clubs, but many wineries have some sort of membership or club available, and they have, like I said, 3 different levels of membership. 2 of these memberships give you access to some of their library wines. Now, library wines mean that they have certain vintages the winemaker has reserved and stored in a cellar so that they can be aged a little bit longer. As some may know, certain wines, as they age, they develop different flavor profiles from when they were first released. So basically, it's a library of wines that they re-release years later. You can always Google library wines to learn more about them, but we thought it was worth mentioning as, like I said, we don't really talk too much about wine clubs that many wineries offer, and this one was a unique feature.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'd never heard of library wines, and now I'm a bit intrigued by this.
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
So as far as cost of their wines start around $26 per bottle, and they can go up as high as $65. Which they only had one at that higher price point. Most of their wines were in that $26 to $35 bottle range, but their reds started around $32, and most were in the mid $40 range. Also, in full transparency, they did give us an industry discount. It was 10 or 15%, I can't remember, off our bottle purchases, which we did take advantage of. However, we didn't need that encouragement to buy wines from them, as they had some really excellent wines.
Yeah, that was just a nice surprise.
It was a nice bonus.
Yeah, we were going home with wine no matter what. In terms of food, they do sell local cheeses, charcuterie, crackers, jams, and various snack items you can purchase. You are allowed to bring in your own food as long as you're sitting outside. So during the colder indoor months, I don't think you're allowed to bring food. No outside alcoholic beverages are allowed, and their site warns you that if you do bring a cooler, they may check it. They do offer some craft beers and hard ciders for those of you who maybe want alcohol but not wine. And for your non-alcoholic drinkers, they have beverages such as bottled water, a few soda varieties, and some other sparkling water options. Okay, time to move on to the fun stuff, and let's talk about the wines themselves. For this part of the podcast, we'll be discussing our individual top 3 wines from this visit. What we talk about today is our own personal likes and preferences based on our own individual taste buds. We are not being paid or endorsed for our recommendations. What one person may like, another way may not. That is why we always say when it comes to wine, drink what you love. That being said, let's talk about our number 3 picks. And Rob, you're going to start us off today with your number 3 pick.
Well, my number 3 pick comes with a big caveat, and that is that you could only enjoy this at the winery. They don't sell it by the bottle, but you can get it by the glass, and that was their sangria.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
Maybe it was due to the high heat that day, but this was a sweet drink, and it was just so good. It had hints of strawberry and pineapple and mango and some other sweet fruits in there. It was just very refreshing on that day. If I only drank one wine while I was there, this would have been it, and I would have been very happy because, again, it was just so refreshing on that hot day. But again, they don't bottle this up, unfortunately, so you're going to have to get to Penns Woods to try it. But that's because they put the fresh fruit into the wine itself. So it's my number 3 pick.
Yeah, and I got to say, I really thought that was a wonderful wine, too. I really would have bought a bottle, but I understand, yeah, like you said, they make it that day with fresh fruits, and you can tell it when you drink it. It really wouldn't be the same if you got it in a bottle and took it home.
No, but it was just so refreshing that day. It was amazing.
Yeah, completely agree. It was a great wine, and I agree with everything you two said. Again, if they cater to the drier palate, but this would be one if you're a sweeter drinker, I'd highly recommend trying.
Especially when it's 100 degrees outside.
It was a hot day.
So my number 3 is the Chambourcin, which I've said before, I love the grape. This is the naked Chambourcin that I'm talking about, meaning no oak, which is perfectly fine by me, to be honest. This just had this really nice and smooth wine with notes of cherry and just that touch of spice that you get with Chambourcin in the finish. All in all, it's just a really great representation of a PA Chambourcin wine. And, you know, Chambourcin is something that grows really well in Pennsylvania, so lots of wineries have it. If you've never tried it before and you're at Penns Woods, definitely give this one a shot.
Yeah, it was the naked Chambourcin because they did have 2.
They did
and
have
I like the naked Chambourcin as well. I liked that it was actually served a little bit more chilled that day, which I thought was great. And I got like hints of craisin in it, which I thought was really unique, that I really liked. But yeah, it almost was my number 3 pick. But instead, I went with the Blanc de Blanc. It's a sparkling wine, and it was the wine that tried to attack us that day.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
We were ducking for cover.
Yeah, so they pulled it out of the cooler, and they put it on the table to let it sit for a few minutes before serving to it. And the next thing I heard was like this pop, and I seen something flying out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, what just happened?
Yeah, who'd have thought that if you take a 37-degree bottle of sparkling wine and put it out into 100-degree heat, that would happen, but...
As the meteorologist, I'm not going to go into the thermodynamics in play here, but let's just say cold versus hot, you're going to get reactions.
Yeah, it's a lot of expansion. They didn't even take the cage off. They just took the foil off. So, like, it popped the cage and the cork. It was
funny. And we joke. It actually was a very hilarious situation. Like, I didn't feel threatened at all by the wine cork.
And nobody got hurt. Everyone was fine.
Yeah, it was fine. So, but yeah.
That wine was just dying to be drank.
I know. It knew how much it needed to get in my stomach. That's what it felt. That's what I felt. Anyway, back to this delicious wine. It's 70% Chardonnay grape and 30% Sauvignon Blanc. It had a lot of bubbles, which I liked. It was crisp with some apple flavor, and I even got some notes of lemongrass. I even got some mild other fruits, I think like pear and peach in it, but it was fun, and it was what I really like about sparkling wines, and it was really good. One of my picks. I think we're ready for number 2 then, right?
Yeah, I'll get us started with the Wildflower White.
Ooh, good
Ooh,
pick.
Yeah, good pick.
So this was a white blend of 5 grapes that's predominantly Chardonnay and Moscato, which, let's just start, to be honest, I think that's a very interesting combination.
Very
You
interesting.
got this traditionally dry, buttery with this traditionally sweet, fruity. It just, yeah, and it worked.
Yeah.
It was just a really solid blend. It had some sweetness, probably from that Moscato, but it finished a touch drier. It was very refreshing on that really hot day. And I just remember really loving the aroma. It was just really bright and inviting.
I even bought a bottle of this. I'm not a big Chardonnay fan, but that combination with the Moscato, just something special about that. And like I said, I bought a bottle of that and drank it later that weekend, and it was fabulous.
Yeah, I brought a bottle home too.
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I remember it was the first wine she gave us that day, and I was like, man, this is awesome. That just set the stage for a really great tasting, in my opinion. All right, so my number 2 pick is the Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, and this was one that actually was only available by the bottle when we visited. So we didn't get to try it there. I really like Sauvignon Blancs, so I basically bought it on a whim to take home and try it, and I'm really glad we did. I got the minerality in it as well as some grapefruit and lime. I just thought it was a really nice example of what a Sauvignon Blanc should be, especially coming from the PA region. And I think you two enjoyed sharing it with me as well because we drank that together.
Yeah, we killed that whole bottle pretty quick too.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite because Sauvignon Blancs is a wine that I'm starting to enjoy a little bit more, and so I was curious to try this one, and I think it made my honorable mention.
Yeah, it was a solid. I'm really glad we bought a bottle. There's always that risk when you buy a bottle of wine, like unknown sometimes, and it was like it paid off.
Yeah, but it was a little bit less of a risk because let's face it, you like them for a completely different reason than I like them, and certainly it was going to fall into one of those categories. But yeah, we both liked it, so
Yeah.
worked out.
Well, for my number 2 pick, I'm going to go off my beaten path a little bit here and choose the Viognier. It's not a wine we've mentioned a lot on the podcast, but I thought Penns Woods did a really wonderful job with this wine. I tasted notes of melon and nectarine, maybe even some mango in there. It was just crisp. Again, maybe that contributed to my liking it on that hot day, but it was a really good taste, and it was light in the acidity, but it was silky smooth in the finish. And so this was just a nice semi-white that I would say check out. It's the Viognier.
Yeah, I liked it as well. I do remember that one.
It's also really funny how climate really changes your taste and your expectations of wine.
I mean, here's the dry red drinker liking a lot of fruity wines that day.
Yeah, but when we go in December to visit a winery, you're not picking a
Oh,
single
no.
grape.
It's Merlot.
Yeah, it was hard to pick because I think there were so many great wines, and all that you've mentioned so far, I easily could have put on my list because they were just awesome. But I think that rules into our number 1 picks, but there was a clear winner for me out of all these wines. That was number 1 to me that day, and that was the Rosé 2023. And I said in the intro, I'm not a rosé person, but I guess I'm officially in the bandwagon because I've been trying all the right ones this year. I've been recommending them a lot. This was on their specialty rosé flight. It was one of the not released ones, if I remember correctly, because there was also a rosé 2022, which I saw for sale on their website, but not the 2023. But I prefer the 2023 vintage, which I think they had different blends in those grapes between the years as well. The blends on the 2023 that I liked was 60% Cab Franc, 25% Merlot, and 15% Cab Sauvignon. I know we use this word for a lot with wines, probably because it was so hot that day, but it was just so refreshing to me that day. I just loved it. I had a whole glass. It reminded me of biting into a fruit. That's why I put my notes through, and I felt like I just bit into a fresh fruit. I got apricot and watermelon and even a hint of strawberry, and it was just a big hit for me that day.
Yeah, I remember the strawberry taste of that one. That I'm not a big strawberry fan, but that was really good.
Yeah.
It was not too much, but not too little.
Yeah, it was just so excellently done.
Well, for my number 1 pick, I think I'm switching bodies with Steve on this one because I'm going off my normal list and I'm picking their Moscato.
Yeah, that's both surprising and unsurprising.
That's a good choice.
That was a good Moscato.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the occasional Moscato, maybe not quite as much as you, Steve, but this one was just spectacular in my opinion. You had that nice presence of the orange blossom common in Moscato wines, but I also got hints of that peach and apricot, maybe even some other fruits were mixed in there as well. It had a nice light pink coloring. It was sweeter to the taste, but it kind of dried out in the finish, which I thought was pretty unique. Maybe it was the heat talking to me, but I really enjoyed the sweeter Moscato, and that was my top pick for the day.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this Moscato as well. I love the fruit notes you mentioned. I didn't put in my notes. I got a hint of pineapple, which I really enjoyed. I loved the drier finish, and I actually ended up buying a bottle of this because it's been a while since I've enjoyed a Moscato that much.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. You said all the right words, Rob. Orange blossom, peach, apricot.
I've been learning.
These are the reasons that I love a Moscato. And in fact, my number one pick was not that Moscato, but another Moscato they had that day, and it was their Moscato Rosé.
Yum.
Now, to be clear, I actually thought these both tasted a lot alike. But there were some subtle differences. There was a little less orange blossom in the rosé, which is funny because that's what I really go for. But it just had this lovely, sweet, and slightly floral aroma, almost with some cotton candy. It was a bit effervescent, which was just perfect because, it is a sweeter wine, and it just kind of helped cut that down. It had these great flavors of watermelon and tangerine. I think watermelon really struck out to me, especially after we let it breathe a little. And all the flavors were just like kind of subtle too. It was obvious what they were, but it wasn't like this overwhelming sweetness like you get with some Moscatos. And another thing, the alcohol content was much lower. It was only at 7%, which is about 5% lower than most wines bottom out at. So all that together, it just made this really refreshing wine. And as it aerated a little bit, it kept changing its flavor profile and gave me something more and interesting to try.
Yeah, I love this wine a lot too, actually. I enthusiastically helped you drink the bottle at home because I thought it was really good. To me, the watermelon was very predominant. I was thinking watermelon candy, but I also got a little bit of hibiscus in it in my flavor profile, and I love hibiscus, so I kind of like that hint. But yeah, it was a really good wine and one that I enjoyed thoroughly with you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, it's about well. All right, let's move on to honorable mentions. Rob, did you have any honorable mentions you wanted to shout out?
I'm going to shout out their Merlot. Have I mentioned I like Merlot?
Yeah.
But I like their Merlot, and I also liked their oaked Chambourcin. Now I know one of you picked the naked Chambourcin, but I actually like their oaked Chambourcin just a little bit better. But honestly,
like oak.
But honestly, any of their wines, I think I could drink.
Yeah, they were all really, really good. I wanted to shout out the Pinot Noir. It almost made my number 3. And I think it may have been, had we not been there the day that it was so hot, I just wasn't feeling those like more room temperature wines. I was, wanted the nice, really cold stuff that day. But it was really nice. It was smooth with some spiciness to it, but it had like notes of pepper and oak and fruit. And it just was a real well-rounded Pinot Noir.
Yeah, and speaking of that Pinot Noir, it also won a gold medal at the San Francisco Chronicle wine competition.
Congrats.
Yeah.
They also mentioned the Chambourcin Reserve won Best Hybrid by the PA Wine Association. Pretty sure they have won other awards through the years, but, our research team didn't get back to us in time. So
Yeah, and those were the two they mentioned specifically that day, which I thought was great. But yeah, Penns Woods was just a great winery. So in conclusions, Penns Woods is a great example of what wines can be produced in the state of Pennsylvania. It's a winery I would highly recommend to those who want to explore Pennsylvania wines more, but like drier or European style wines. They have a lovely setting with an amazing staff. Shout out again to Dawn, who was awesome. And of course, they offer delicious wines. They definitely got a gold medal in our books. For more information, please visit their website, pennswoodswinery.com, or find them on social media. We would also appreciate it if you found us on social media if you haven't yet. Please also help us grow by liking and subscribing to our podcast where available. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Wine Time PA with your host Rob, Holly, and Steve. We hope you enjoyed our take on Pennsylvania wineries and all that they have to offer. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Also, be sure to follow them on social media for updates and news. Remember, when it comes to wine, drink what you love.